Good evening, friends. Today we are going to talk about a topic which is rarely discussed: democracy. Democracy is a small word with a vast meaning, a word with deep thoughts, a word with our birthrights. I know my today's viewers has a complete understanding about the democratic system and has their own opinion. But today we are going to talk about a very vital and not much spoken topic, that is bureaucracy in democracy. We will not only talk about Indian scenario but also a worldwide view we want to get. It's my pleasure to have very learned person on board with us, professor, ex-bureaucrat, political expert, and so on. Today, we are going to talk about what's the role of the bureaucrat in the democratic system, how bureaucracy regulate the democracy, or democracy regulated by the bureaucracy. Today, we have Dr. Om Prakash Mishra, a very well-known face in Bengal, Professor Dr. Om Prakash Mishra. He is a professor of international relations, Jadavpur University, Calcutta. Previously, he served as a vice chancellor of IGNOU. He has been invited to more than 80 universities around the globe. He served the nation as a former member, National Security Advisory Board. His expertise areas are political economics, international relation, foreign policy, and national security. I will request I will request Professor Dr. Misra to highlight on today's topic. Sir.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Yasmin, and it is a pleasure to participate in the webinar, which I understand you organize from time to time. And I'm also very glad that some of the uh, best experts, so to speak, in different domains, they are part of this panel. As you have laid out, that the topic for discussion today broadly bureaucracy in democracy. And then, of course, as you pointed out, that you possibly also would like to delve into the question that how, to what extent, in what way bureaucracy facilitates democracy, and obverts that in what particular ways possibly uh, bureaucracy is a hindrance to the functioning of democracy. Well, I strongly believe that bureaucracy uh, and bureaucratic system is perennial. It may be so that the present shape of the bureaucratic structure that we find in the world is not older than 200 years, but at every point of time in history, some form of administration and an administrative setup has always been a hallmark of any organized political community. And so, therefore, of course, today I should first remember Max Weber, who was the pioneer and who talked in terms of how government and administration gets itself organized and what are the principles on which the bureaucracy depends and operates upon. And then, of course, he had drawn out, as many of the audience here, they would understand, the ideal type of bureaucracy and the pyramid and so on. So, without getting into the details, my first point is that, of course, without administrative setup, bureaucracy, it is not possible to run political systems in an organized way. So, therefore, broadly speaking, I tend to support the proposition that bureaucracy facilitates democracy. Why do I say this? Because the democracy that we know today, whether in here in our country, in India, or in Malawi, or for that matter in Bangladesh, or for that matter in country in Latin America or Europe, is indirect. And basically, there is no scope, given the burgeoning population, there is no scope for direct democracy. Gone are the days, possibly of century-old situation that where direct democracy could even be possible. So therefore, since we have an indirect democracy, these representatives are elected and then they form the government, and the government needs continuity, and so therefore bureaucracy becomes inevitable. So now let us. Well, I will just. It occurred to me to come up with a joke, and that in one of the uh, Delhi offices of the central government, a chowkidar, a chowkidar was slapped by a minister because of some issue. He was slapped by the minister, and instead of getting infuriated, the chowkidar started laughing. And the minister was very curious that now I have slapped you, and how come that instead of you being sullen or angry, you are laughing? The chowkidar replied that, well, actually, this is one instance of a non-permanent employee slapping a permanent employee, meaning thereby that the ministers come and ministers would go, but the chowkidar will remain. The bureaucrats or the administrative structure, the support structure, and all the paraphernalia that has been built over and over through the years and decades, that is going to stay. So that is why the chowkidar was laughing, and the minister actually would not stay there, because this is democracy, and the democracy is all about governance and what way we can arrange and rearrange our system so as to maximize the happiness or maximize the comfort in terms of laws, regulations, uh, and so on, and that is why democracy of the present type or variety that has come to being. We talk in terms of formal democracy, and then of course there's entire issue related to participatory democracy. Only when there is a formal democracy, it is possible perhaps, and I am arguing it very differently. Only then possibly it is possible to have uh, participatory democracy. So once you have the formal structure of democracy, like that we have here in India, then the democracy can be expanded, it can be broadened, and more layers of decision making can be added up. And that is what we have seen, observed in relationship to how the people's participation, political participation, participation in government issues, these are all facilitated by democracy. And democracy also makes for a responsible uh, governance, because after all, those who are in power, those who are uh, dictating the policy, they have to necessarily try attempt to continue be in the power, and if that be the case, then they have to continue to deliver, and that deliver part is something that has to be on a continuous basis, and that basis can only be provided by the administrative structure and bureaucracy that we may have. Now, when we say that the bureaucracy also impedes, that is true, because bureaucracy is supposed also to impede. Because if the bureaucrats, those who have the responsibility, they have a responsibility in relationship to the continuation of the government and the continuation of the governance, and so therefore it is very much necessary that by characteristically they would be conservative, and then they would rather go by the laws and regulations. They have to follow in relationship to the constitutional provisions and in relationship to uh, the legislature's responsibility, parliament's responsibility to enact the law. And so therefore this impedes. At some point of time, long back rather, I had characterized IAS, ironclad of administration, as you know, that I am safe service. and this can actually uh, uh, be taken to ridiculous extent that many people, they just want to pass on their responsibility, and so therefore they would not come up and point out what they would rather like to do so. Now, fortunately for our country and in most of the developing countries also, this role is played by bureaucracy. But then when this role facilitates uh, uh, you know the political class, I mean the those who are ministers and so on, then you have a convergence. But then whenever, as soon as there is a divergence, or if the bureaucrat thinks differently, then he or she, increasingly we are seeing, they are quite shy of pointing this out at all. And this is becoming a very big problem. And I'm just would like to refer to this excellent open letter that has been penned down by members of the civil service in the country, retired civil servants, and they have pointed out that how something like Hathras, especially uh, especially the attempts by the state government of Uttar Pradesh, how that was supposed to get buried, and then the IAS Association and the IPS Association, and many of they simply did not do anything. And so here we have actually the bureaucrats, they themselves are writing that the gold standard of efficiency and effectiveness has really come down. And as you all know that Mr. Vittal, who himself was a All India Service holder and IAS, and who has written extensively on civil service and so on after his retirement, especially, he he pointed out that actually, we have very powerful institutions, and there's institutions like the Election Commission, the Comptroller Auditor General, and we have, of course, the judiciary, and we have the Central Vigilance Commission. And he himself was a Central Vigilance Commissioner at one point of time. Now, according to him, these institutions are powerful enough to ensure that the bureaucracy actually would be checked, and at the same time, bureaucracy is actually, it is possible for them to serve the country in relationship to the rules, regulations, and so on. But frankly speaking, I think our constitutional democracy today, it has now become imperiled. All the institutions that I just mentioned, they possibly are not fulfilling their role at all. And in fact, it is unbelievable but true that even today, the abrogation, say, of Article 370, which has been challenged in the Supreme Court, has not been taken up by the Supreme Court. And then you have many laws which are passed, which actually it will be impossible to implement. I'm talking of this so-called amendment in the Citizenship Act, and which, of course, my view is that it will never be implemented. It can never be implemented. But then all this is happening. So either the bureaucrats, they are not advising the political class correctly, or rather we have a political class, a political leadership which is brazen, and that brazenness actually shows through when you find that all the institutions of control that the government uh, can have, these are now have become so very subservient, to the extent that it all depends on the who is going to get extension and who is not, whose term is going to be. So transfers and postings and responsibility allocations, reallocations, all this has become so very much common. I do remember, of course, I said that I am safe service. As Nafisha pointed out, at one point of time, I worked, or rather, I was a member of the National Security Advisory Board to the Prime Minister. And then this is nothing very confidential now that the more than 10 years have gone by. We find that, the bureaucrats, they would rather not sign up on some of the very important purchases. Say, for example, submarine. So if you do not sign up, if you do not participate, and then on the day that it is supposed to happen, then somebody is going on leave or something like that, and then you keep on adding on your burden. By the way, when I refer to the submarine, so I'm telling you that this is a delay of the 10, 15 years, and which principally happened not because of the lack of the political will, but because of the chicanery of the bureaucrats. Now, so far as the corruption aspects are concerned, I think that bureaucrats and the political class, they have always been hand in glove. So therefore, when you say that the politician has been cheating or trying to cheat, so that basically it is being facilitated by the bureaucrats, or when the bureaucrats uh, uh, people in the bureaucracy, they are actually trying to subvert the system by indulging in corrupt acts. That means that the watchdogs, they are either asleep or they are actually not actuated by the situation, or for that matter, the political class is either naive, inexperienced, or they are, as I said, they are hand in glove. Now, we do not have a spoiled system, and we stand here in our democracy uh, as a continuation. It's not like the US system, where with change of the administration, there's a whole lot of change, especially at the senior level, at the bureaucratic administrative level. We do not have that type of a system, but then I think that the spoiled system is coming back. It is coming back in the sense that you have now uh, uh, entire power, and that power is now getting misused time and again in many different ways and format and so on. And so, therefore, I think that this spoil system has come about. That the bureaucrats, they get posting of their choice, and then many a times it is said that they have been able to buy their posting, and it's about the posting, it is about transfer, and the same is about extension and so on. And now we find that something which was supposed to be very smooth, reference to center-state relations. In fact, the Constitution of India has devoted considerable amount of space with the provisions related to administrative relations between center and state, and the Constitution very beautifully also provides for an inbuilt check and balance with regard to the all India services, and the powers, respective powers of the central government and the state government. But then, as we have seen more recently, especially here in West Bengal, with reference to Sri Alapan Bandyopadhyay, who has been the chief secretary, that how the central government has attempted to bring in political wish of the party in power at the center to be foisted on a bureaucrat who actually has been doing his duty, mountain duty in relationship to the state government, where he is posted as chief secretary. As chief secretary, he is expected to work under and with the chief minister of the state, the political executive. But here we find that because of some of the rules, regulations which are there, and these are now been actually misinterpreted. So that is my view. And the central government, which itself has actually given him a 3 month extension, or had actually agreed to the extension, have sought to punish him on the last day that he was supposed to complete his tenure as a member of the Indian Administrative Service. So therefore, the administrative relations between the center and state, which was generally not very much questioned, has actually now become also a point of contention, which is not very healthy for our constitutional democracy. And I would even add to say that the all the arrangements between the center and state, constitutional arrangement, they are supposed to help keep us together as a nation, and they are actually to smoothen. So this is a different type of check and balance which actually has been interwoven into the constitutional scheme of the country, apart from the broader separation of power that we find, of course, in the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. So in the same way that in the formal structure, that you have so many hyphens and so many connecting points between the different branches of government, and the same is there with reference to the center and the state. And somehow I think that is actually getting undermined. So So bureaucracy is in a retreat. Bureaucracy is in crisis, and bureaucracy is now become subservient to the political class in a way which is actually not very healthy for our democracy. And this is how I look at the overall situation and scenario. I would like to add, since I have another 2 3 minutes possibly, I would like to add that throughout the world, you find that the bureaucracy is all the time castigated. But then that necessarily should not happen, because whatever way you might look at it, you actually would need to have administrative setup. And this administrative setup has actually helped smoothen democracy, has helped reach people. Now, for example, if we say that we are now in the midst of a biggest vaccination drive, so that is, of course, a question of production, a technology, and trial and science. And of course, it's a political question. It's a little bit of an economic question. But then, delivery question, that is, of course, on the bureaucracy. So the India, such a very big country, and everywhere in the world, now all the countries, as I said, they have to be necessarily responsive and responsible if they need to get elected. And so therefore you find that whole lot of convergence has emerged between bureaucracy in trying to deepen democracy in order to have a more participatory democracy. There are hundreds of different types of flaws. We can go on and on, but overall, I would rather say that the bureaucracy is actually is is a facilitator. It is a point of convergence, and therefore all the types of divergences which arises from time to time, it is it actually results because of misinterpretation. It also results because of high-handedness. It also results because of the abuse of authority that the elected officials, I mean elected ministers, and the council of ministers, they have been entrusted with. So thank you very much, Yashwin ji, and this is what all I had to say in the allocated 15 minutes. I suppose I have taken 16 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your input. And definitely the point you mentioned, that is really good input, and this some points are really debatable. But we'll not come to that. We will ask your next speaker to come on board. Yes, now we get a ex-bureaucrat, Mr. Vivek Atri, a man who shows his courage, to run after dream and quit his job as an IAS officer, and that is also 7 years before his superannuation. We are getting him, and what a wonderful motivational speaker, author of many books. He's a mentor, advisor, and a columnist, regular columnist, and he's a visiting professor for many universities. He's a TEDx and Joe speaker. Today he is going to talk about something else. He is going to talk about his views as an ex-bureaucrat and enrich us with his knowledge and experience. Sir?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nafisa, and thank you very much, Professor Mishra, who spoke before me, for setting the context. A very good idea to organize this webinar and this discussion on a very important topic of bureaucracy and democracy. And Professor Mishra, I think, gave a wonderful lecture. It was very balanced, very topical, and very well presented. I must compliment him. I'm sure that his talk will be well received everywhere, wherever it goes. I will try to give a practical context to the situation, and going forward, what should be the highlight of India and how we should work in India, perhaps. So I served for 26 years as a civil servant, which is also the term used with bureaucracy, a bureaucrat. So I was a Haryana Civil Services officer for about 19 years. And for 7 years, I was an IAS officer after being promoted. And I resigned after a total of 26 years in the service because I became a motivational speaker, writer, and advisor to a university. I wanted to advise universities. I wanted to get into education. I wanted to write more and speak to the youth. My experience with the bureaucracy in democracy is that I think the best example that we can give is that of Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, the show, the TV program which BBC used to present many, many years ago in England. And Sir Humphrey, who was the top bureaucrat with the minister, and how their relationship was always very amusing to us, to the viewers, because it was a comedy, but how witty and how extremely sensitive they were in discussing their matters. And I remember one which will highlight the thrust of what I'm going to say today, where Sir Humphrey is asked by the minister, with the other junior bureaucrat was also watching in the same scene. And the minister asks him, can we do this? I want to do this for my constituency. Can I do this kind of project? It was some public welfare scheme which he had planned to get more votes, perhaps. And Sir Humphrey doesn't say yes or no. He goes on using extremely complicated verbiage, language, verbosity, complex, perhaps like Mr. Shashi Tharoor would use, also an ex-bureaucrat in many ways. And Sir Humphrey comes up with no answer to him, but confuses the minister even more. And at the end of it, the minister is looking at him, gawking, open-mouthed, wondering what is the reply that Humphrey has given in 10 minutes of complicated answer. He looks at him, he says, Humphrey, is that a no? Humphrey says, yes. So ultimately, the bureaucracy should know and knows how to say no. This is the key to bureaucracy in democracy. When to say yes, when to say no, how to say no. Saying yes is not difficult, because when the politicians want something and it is doable, it is logical, it is in public interest, yes, it must be done. And it should be done speedily and efficiently and properly. And there's no problem. But when you have to say no, how do you say that? That is the key to the role of bureaucracy, because bureaucracy cannot be yes men, yes women, yes people all the time. You can't be a yes man. You can't be pleasing only the bureaucratic or the political rather bosses. You can't go on and on and on saying yes, 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 sure, sure, sure. Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. This will be done, sir. This is possible, sir. Yes, sir, yes, sir. Ho jayega, sir. This is what many people tend to do, and then they end up in trouble. A balanced bureaucrat should be one. At least 20 to 30 to 40% of the time he may have to say no, depending on how reasonable or unreasonable is the minister or the politician concerned. The local MLA, I have been SDM, DC, I've been in various places. Local MLAs are always there, because India is a democracy. Each part of India is covered by legislature, state legislature, unless you are a union territory like Chandigarh, which doesn't have a local legislature but only has one MP. But the MLA, the local MLA and the local councillor, municipal councillor, will have his vote bank, will have his interest. And as Professor Mishra said, may have even more interests than required, which are not really ethical interests. So what does the officer do? Does the officer keep on saying yes sir, or yes ma'am, whatever the case may be? Cannot. You have to take a stand. So I remember giving a practical example of my career. I remember being SDM, a young officer, and I got a call. This has to be done. I realized that this cannot be done, whatever it was. So I didn't do anything about it, and I kept sitting on it. The minister called again. This has to be done. Then I said, sir, this actually I've looked at it, I examined it, and I don't think this can be done. He said, are you sure? Yes, sir, very sure. That helped me so much in my career. Saying no to a powerful minister in the beginning of my career meant that most people got to know that this officer is not pliable. The word pliable. Pliable is not the same as flexible or adaptive. We are again referring to Mr. Shashi Tharoor, who is a member of parliament. Why can't we refer to him in this? He has been a bureaucrat. He is now an MP. The point is that we cannot go beyond a point. Bureaucracy has to strengthen democracy by pointing out what is correct, by doing what is correct, by facilitating development correctly, and not bowing only to the wishes of the local politician or the state politician or the central level politicians. And the central level politician or the state level or the local level politician, what will he or she do? They will have to understand that these officers are not going to comply with our unreasonable demands, but will comply with the reasonable demands. If that is the stand of the bureaucracy, the nation will benefit, states will benefit, districts will benefit, and then there will be no problem in democracy. The problem arises when this is vitiated. When one person starts doing things which are not illegal, perhaps could be illegal also, but out of the way, देख लीजिएगा, ये कर दीजिएगा, तरीका निकाल लीजिएगा, might be the request of the politician. The bureaucrat has to take a stand if it is not correct, because one man's benefit may be to the loss of the society, detriment of the society. How can we allow it? We cannot. So we have to make sure that we are conscious of this fact, and we have to make sure that we are able to take a stand. And taking that stand is the key to democracy. Because in a democracy, look at a state, West Bengal, Haryana, Punjab, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, any state. The chief minister and the minister will not always be from the same area. One MLA, maybe MLA for 3 terms, never got into a ministerial role. He could not really, or she could not really do what was to be done for the public because was never in power actually. And maybe one day that power comes, his constituency suddenly comes into limelight. Maybe he becomes the chief minister. In a democracy, that rotation will take place, which is good. Sometimes from some area, a minister, sometimes from some area, a minister, sometimes from another area, another party. Parties keep changing, their power keeps changing. It's a good thing. Of course, in West Bengal, many years there was one party. In the center also many years there has been one party. And now also we see many terms being repeated, which may or may not be in the interest of the country and the society. In the US, there is a cap of 8 years for a president. And those 8 years cannot be increased to 9 years. In China, the leader has declared that he will be for life, he will be the leader of the country. Of course, there is no democracy. But in India, we have to see whether repetition of the same party, the same power, the same parties is in the interest of the country or not, in the interest of the public or not. We have a think tank called Suvichar, by the way. And Suvichar has come up with many ideas for democracy and thoughts about judicial reform, education reform, even civil services reform we are working on. So what is the role of the bureaucracy and how can the bureaucracy stay with the times? Bureaucracy has to modernize itself. Training of bureaucracy has to be impeccable. Better than Tata's or Birla's or Infosys or Wipro training, or at least equal to that. I know for a fact that companies like Infosys, they train their people at the Mysore Development Center for Infosys, which I visited. It's a fantastic facility. Great trainers. I have also been speaking to them, to the trainees. It is amazing how they train their people. Despite having the best academy in the country, in Mussoorie, we don't really include in that training certain components which are required today. How do you handle the politician? Do we get into the depth of that training? How to handle the media? Is our bureaucrat prepared enough to handle the media, for example? The fourth estate, the pillar of democracy, media. Media will be in your face as a bureaucrat. Politician is calling you up. Boss is calling you up. The media is going on badgering you or going on, let's say, asking you for a response. You are the DC or the DM or the collector. You cannot handle the media with all its pressures and the suddenly live television and minister wanting something else. At the same time, you are under pressure. Public is there in your doorstep. Staff is also disgruntled unless you are trained properly. And then the recruitment of civil services or bureaucracy is incomplete. Emotional intelligence is never tested. What is required when you are handling a political sensitive situation? Supposing an IAS officer is an observer, or before that, he is a returning officer in his career. Sensitive situation. Cannot be casual, cannot say anything he or she likes, cannot behave without emotional intelligence. All the mathematics marks, 100 out of 100 which you got in your 12th class, or in IIT you were topper, they don't count for anything over there. I'm also an engineer, by the way. But it doesn't count for anything over there. We have to have that sensible dealing with the public. Ultimately, the test of bureaucracy is how the bureaucracy responds to pressure, how the bureaucracy reacts and responds, how people are able to handle the pressures that come. That is what the test is. And when the going gets tough, is the bureaucrat able to maintain that balance? So many instances were given by Professor Mishra, and obviously many instances are there in the papers today. There is pressure on the bureaucracy. We saw one DM or somebody slapping the staff. Now, DMs may have slapped somebody before also in our history, but today the YouTube camera is there. It was never there before. I myself have seen an officer pushing around a chowkidar when I was a trainee because he was not happy with that chowkidar and chowkidar was drunk or whatever. He pushed him 2-3 times. But there was no camera. And nowadays these things are increasing. They are being enhanced. They are being absolutely, the pressure on bureaucracy is multifold. Of course, I resigned and you can say that I am sitting pretty, not having any of those pressures. But it is extremely important that young bureaucrats are not only trained, but before they are trained, the recruitment process is also such that the personality test is not the only test. Those 40 minutes of answers are not what matters only. It is the army does a better job rather. The army with its SSB, etc., takes a week to recruit officers. And they go into the psychology, they go into the entire thinking of that young candidate, that boy or girl who is trying to enter the service. Here we go mainly with the marks of the preliminary exam. You crossed it, you main exam, your marks in the UPSC interview, and then you come into the personality test. You may or may not do well, but you are through because you got great marks in the mains. Intelligence is required, no doubt. But emotional intelligence, people skills, sensible responses, balanced responses, a personality which is amenable to pressure, which has empathy with others, that is a bureaucrat who will succeed in doing public welfare. Otherwise, not possible. Therefore, I think it is very important that we revamp some of the aspects of the bureaucracy. We revamp the training, we revamp the recruitment, we revamp the promotion, we revamp a number of things that happen within the service also. For example, mentorship is non-existent. In the corporate world, you'll find the mentorship is there. Here, what happens, an IAS officer comes or an IPS officer comes. For 35 years, he is alone virtually, because there is no organized system of mentorship. He or she will go back to the academy for midterm training. Yes, but that midterm training is not, there is nobody there to actually let out your fears and your worries and your your problems. So within the service of a state, the cadre, the chief secretaries can actually designate that these 10 senior people will mentor the young officers also. And they can meet them one-on-one. They are available. Just like a school has a psychologist or a counselor, and the children can go. Even older people need that kind of mentoring at times. I think these are the reforms that will help. And what about politicians? Politicians also need training. Politicians also need to go to school. School means they have been to some kind of school, of course, but they need to be trained when they are coming into minister's role. Who is training the minister? Just because he or she has been in public life, to sit on the chair and sign the file or to hold a meeting is a specialized task. You are now a leader, and that leader has to perform like a leader, like a seasoned administrator. And very few leaders are able to do it without training. Training is vital. So Nafisa is there. I think my time is up, and it's a wonderful opportunity that you gave me to speak. I did give some examples from my own life, and I'm very happy with my career of 26 years in the service. Very even more happy with my speaking role now. But I think our bureaucracy is healthy overall, needs fine-tuning, value addition, improvement, and I keep writing and speaking about it. Our democracy is definitely strong. India is still the only country in the world, in this part of the world at least, where the transition of power takes place smoothly in any state or any in the center, or sometimes in the states there is some garbad happening, but normally it is quite healthy. All the best, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your input. And we have really learned a lot. And really, your life experience and your input is definitely meaningful to all of us. And I know it will be implemented in future. That you talked about the minister has to be educated and the mentoring of the IS. I can relate. I can relate all this what you was talking, because for my job and other things I need to interact with the many fresh bureaucrats who are just passed out, and for their dynamic result they got this position at first go. So the age may be 25, 26, but it's a huge responsibility without any mentoring, without no one there to say what you have to do. So it's a very big pressure, I can understand. And the way they react, they don't even know how to. I'm not talking about how they talk to their bosses, they talk to the politician. As a general citizen, even they don't know how to react with them. So that is a very big gap, and I know that will be addressed very soon. And I know you keep going academy also, Masori also. So there's some change you will come there, you will bring there, and we will definitely get our next generation new bureaucrat with a new attitude and a new vision also. Thank you, sir. Thanks for being with us. Definitely, we will meet again. And friends, now I will bring. I want. Our next speaker, a person who is a COVID-19 frontline warrior, Dr. Halim. Dr. Fuad Halim is a very well-known name in Calcutta, and on whom people can depend for his kind gesture and his so noble works. He is, I know many of us knows this. He has conducted more than 2,500 dialysis since lockdown at the rate of 50 rupees only. This is a really big gesture. This is a really big contribution to the society. I am really happy to welcoming Dr. Halim with us. Beside his passionate medical practitioner, he is a rationalist and rebel movement activist, and he's a social worker, social scientist, social communicator, and he runs NGOs and work for underprivileged people of the society. He's a person who has a totally political background also. But today I want he should say about his view because he walked in so many spheres of the society, so he can give a very clear view about these topics, bureaucrats and in democracy. Dr. Halim.
Thank you. Good evening, Naspisa. And it's nice to be on a panel. And my regards to Professor Om Prakash Mishra and Vivek Atray, who've spoken before me. They have already elaborated on the topic in depth, and they've spoken from personal experience. I, as a person, I speak from the outside. And what I look upon in terms of democracy, because we are going to contrast that with bureaucracy, is that at the time of independence, our forefathers who struggled against the British, they had very clearly defined that India would be a democracy. And the reason why we are fighting the battle for freedom is to ensure that Indians get the opportunity to rule themselves. And by Indians ruling themselves, there was a very clear understanding that all the citizens would get equal franchise in choosing who would lead them and who would lead the future of India. Now, if you look at these structures constitutionally, they primarily boil down to the legislative. From the legislative, we do have a section who then move on to the political executive, which indirectly now become accountable to the people. Contrast this to the other two pillars of our what we call constitutional structure, that is the judiciary and the bureaucratic executive, where there is no democratic control, there is no accountability to the people directly. And these mechanisms at the time of independence were spoken of elaborately in the Constituent Assembly. In fact, if you go into the debates of the Constituent Assembly as to why we are choosing at this point of time to continue with protecting the bureaucracy from the political executive, it was discussed that at the time of independence, since we are going through a phase of turmoil, we need to ensure that the bureaucracy, which will be the steel frame of Indian government, that was Vallabhbhai Patel's idea, should be insulated, and they should be accountable only to the higher officers of the bureaucracy and the governor and the president of India for the state and the national bureaucracy, central bureaucracy, respectively. Now, we've crossed a lot of time. We have matured as a country. We have degenerated as a country. Our democratic structure at the moment, if you look at the electoral results across board, the spirit of India that was envisaged, that everybody would get to participate in choosing who our leaders would be, has somehow boiled down to about a 30 to 35% mandate. So if 30 to 35% of Indians choose a particular political structure, then they get the opportunity to decide who is going to choose the future leaders of India. Now, our democracy needs to mature. And I see the contrast between democracy and bureaucracy actually fundamentally arising from this contradiction, where our democracy has not matured and we've not moved to a democracy where proportional representation, that is the percentage of votes that are polled for a particular political structure, ensures that amount of representation in the legislative, until we do not move to a mature form of dealing with a democracy, and we are just still in a system where first by the post is going to ensure who is what you call going to lead us, then we are going to have the problems that we are now facing in terms of democracy and bureaucracy. Now, when Vallabhbhai Patel envisaged the steel framework of Indian government would be the bureaucracy, he assumed that the bureaucracy would override the narrow political, what you call, goals of the political hierarchy and the political executive, and would be available to the service of the general people, that is the 100% Indians. But over time, the bureaucracy has degenerated to understand that if they, along with the political hierarchy that they support, or by whose support they find favor of, they can continue to just service 30 to 35% of the population and still get away without being accountable. Now, that is one of the limitations of our functional, what we call practice in the bureaucracy as well as the political executive. There are other issues also. I will not what we call expand this to include the judicial part of the of our pillar, constitutional pillar, but to a certain degree the judiciary also is what we call not accountable to the people. They are not elected by the people, and hence it's a pillar which is again far removed from the democratic ethos of our constitutional structure. The bureaucracy by itself, it has its own inherent what you call problems. It has its own problems of which has removed it from general society. They have become isolated from general society. They are unresponsive, and primarily because they are unaccountable. But there is a problem which comes from the other side also. If you look at the democratic process through which legislatures are elected, and through the legislators when the political executive is elected, then you're getting people in positions who are not experts in a number of subjects, or expert in that particular subject of which he or she is a minister, or he or she is leading in terms of that department. Now, the bureaucrats on this front may be experts, and that expertise lends some degree of credence to the fact that on the question of continuity, one definitely has an argument that because of the vagaries of the political changes that impact our democratic what we call elections, where politicians may come and go, political parties may come and go, the continuation of certain services or bureaucratic performance in terms of continuity is essential, and those people, because of that continuity, garner a certain degree of expertise in that field, especially in terms of administration. We've seen that recently, what you call, play itself out in the COVID management situation, where we've seen that the bureaucratic structure, especially those who are health experts and those who are dealing with the health structures in India, have many a time had to compromise and pander to the political desire of actually going in for measures that somehow have not been related to actually elevating the distress of the people from COVID. We had the famous incident of clapping hands, putting lights off, lighting candles, etc., all these things. And when these things raise their heads up, the moot question comes is that why didn't the bureaucracy have the spine to actually stand up to the political executive and tell them that we are experts in this subject. If you're going to clap hands, if you're going to put off lights and put on lights, if you're going to shower flower petals, it's not going to impact the spread of COVID. It's not going to impact in any way how COVID is going to modify its behavior. So from this, you get an impression that there's a nexus between the political hierarchy and the bureaucratic hierarchy, where the interest of the common man, despite basic common sense and basic scientific what you call ideas, they explain that they have been overridden, and experts in those fields have not shown the courage to actually stand up to the political executive. Now, this nexus is now the experience of our independent India for such a long time. And this nexus that has grown, where the bureaucrats scratch the political executives back and the political executive scratches the bureaucrats back. And there's a very hunky-dory relationship where the people of India, the people who are supposed to benefit by the ideals of the constitution, where equality is the foundation, freedom is a foundation, fundamental right, these are overridden. And we find that when the bureaucrat is tasked with implementing government policies or programs, especially when this is as an end result giving benefit to the people at large, then we find there is a slant into how these bureaucrats deliver these what we call policies and programs and packages to the people, and there is political preferences which should not ideally be there, which our constituent fathers had envisaged, and which is why they had protected the bureaucracy from the political influence. And politicians are the only ones to be affected by corruption is something that is, I think so, will be taken with a pinch of salt. So corruption overrides our entire what you call constitutional structures. It impacts the bureaucracy, it impacts the political executive, and it also, to a certain degree, impacts the other pillars that are there in our country at this moment. Uh, I would like to elaborate a little bit on what Vivek Atre said on emotional intelligence and empathy. You know, emotional intelligence and empathy is something that is not factored in when we are trying to recruit new people into our bureaucracy, and that is a problematic. That's a problematic because, as Vivek had mentioned, that when you're dealing with people, especially when you have the constitutional mandate to be just, because a bureaucrat in an administrative position has to be just. That's what the Constitution of India expects of him. And when he needs to be just, he needs to have that empathy within him to actually understand as to how that just decision is to be taken. Unfortunately, the way we choose our bureaucrats today, or in fact, if we look at across the board, the way we choose our engineers today, the way we choose our doctors today, the profession that I come from, the empathy quotient is something which is neither what we call given any weightage while selecting somebody who becomes a bureaucrat, a doctor, an engineer, or any other thing where large public interest is involved. And secondly, the empathy quotient is not even factored into the training. So, how does one develop the qualities of empathy, especially when one has a constitutional mandate to deliver services in a just way to the people of India as mandated through the struggle of our freedom movement? Now, that's the core idea. So the British administrative system was carried through into free India with the need to overcome the turmoils and trials of our birthing process as a country. And we thought that we would take advantage of this system, and that advantage would translate itself to improving the quality of life of our common citizens. That has not happened. There have been changes in the behavior of the bureaucracy. Until liberalization, bureaucracy had a significant decision making capacity as to how economic development would take place in India. And that what you call process has been uh, changed after liberalization to a certain extent, but it has now translated itself in such a way where economic liberalization, moving from the domain of the bureaucrats, has come into the domain of the political hierarchy, especially legislature, where we've seen legislative what we call activity bringing itself forward to ensure that large capital keeps on increasing its capacity. There is one point that I'd like to make, and that is, if you look at countries where bureaucracy have been very, very successful in performing, if you look at recently China, for example, and in the COVID, what we call situation, over there, the health bureaucracy and the general bureaucracy, they have very effectively combined to ensure that COVID has not even crossed 1 lakh cases in China. Now that tells you something of how the system in China is actually ensuring that the political hierarchy and the bureaucratic hierarchy find common cause in confronting a challenge that is facing the citizens of the country. We've seen the same response in Australia, we've seen the same response in New Zealand, we've seen the same response in Japan also. These are the countries that have been successful in actually confronting COVID-19 today. The countries that have failed miserably, like America, we've seen that the bureaucracy of there, the political leadership, the health administration, they have failed miserably in combining their capacities, even though being the most advanced country, to actually confront the tide of COVID. And India on is in second place today globally, and that report card which is valid for America is also valid for India today. So what I think in a basic nutshell to wrap up today is that we need to make bureaucracy more accountable to the people rather than the top hierarchy of their own what you call cadre, because any junior officer is only accountable to his senior officer. He is never accountable to the people of India. And secondly, the nexus between the political hierarchy and the bureaucratic hierarchy, that needs to be resolved. I don't have an offhand solution because corruption seems to be the base of this. The bureaucracy can be divided into two parts. One is the administrative bureaucracy and the police bureaucracy. The police bureaucracy is totally hand in glove with the political hierarchy, and that's the true picture of India as of today. So we need to think out of the box. We need to think from a people's perspective, and I think so. I would agree with Vivek that without empathy and looking forward to how to enforce the constitutional mandate would be very, very difficult, and will be reaching no solution at all. So I look at it positively in terms of the fact that people in India are realizing to a great extent that our systems are failing, and we need to think out of the box to actually reach our goals that our forefathers who sacrificed their lives for the freedom of India have actually looked at. Thank you, Nafisa, for giving me this opportunity to speak as a lay person on bureaucracy and democracy.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your input. We got so many input in this topic. We will come to our last speaker. Dr. Giri. Now our last speaker, and who is an expert in international politics. We request him to give us a glimpse of international situation, and especially about the European countries. And Dr. Giri, he is a professor international politics, Jamia Millia Islamia University. He worked as a political consultant, author of many books. He's a regular columnist, political analyst, and he is the best person to tell us about the world scenario, I do believe. Dr. Giri, I will request, because we got so many, outlook from our prior three speakers, but I will request you to please highlight the world scenario, how the other countries are dealing, who are following democracy, how they are dealing with their bureaucrats, and or either their bureaucrats, how they are. So kindly highlight on this world scenario, please. Sir, unmute your microphone, please. Now it's okay.
Getting used to this digital system. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Kindly. Yes, sir. Carry on.
Good. I was saying to be the last speaker is really special because it's a mixed bag. You have the advantage of listening to the previous speakers, and in this case, with rich and diverse background. And the disadvantage is that you may not have many things to say. But since you asked me to talk about the international experience or the practice, I may have something new to say. Having heard these experienced three speakers, I feel that there is a bit of conceptual clarity that we need to bring in. I mean, it is applicable in any stage in public life, and I have been really bothered about it, that what is the exact meaning of a concept translated into action. In this case, we have democracy and bureaucracy. Someone said that it is easy to explain or define a democracy, but difficult to practice. It is easy to practice capitalism, but difficult to explain. In this case, it is perhaps easy to be a bureaucrat, but difficult to explain what bureaucracy means. You see, we know that the British invented this system for us. We inherited it from them. It was called ICS earlier. Then we called it IAS, and back to ICS, Indian Civil Service. It was created to collect revenue from Indians, transfer it back to UK, also during the World War to supply to the frontline fighters in the Second World War. So that's how perhaps our district magistrates also are called collectors. I am reminded, you talked about international experience. I am reminded of a humorous but famous quote in the Travelogue by Aldous Huxley, the British novelist. He said, and this will give a flavor of what I am perhaps trying to present in the given slot. He said, if you meet the following people in your life, you have a nightmare: a British cook, a French policeman, a Spanish organizer, an Italian driver, a German diplomat, and an Indian bureaucrat. What perhaps he meant was that these are difficult people to deal with. There is nothing called British food really. Curry in England is the chicken tikka masala, which is the Indian curry. Then the Chinese compete with us in marketing their food, and the British beef steak is almost out of currency. Likewise, you have French policemen, very heavy-handed, Italian drivers worse than the Delhi three-wheeler drivers, and the German diplomat. I think they reverse the definition of diplomacy. Diplomacy, as we studied, is to say a nastiest thing in a nicest way. But Germans do the opposite. They will say a nice thing in a nasty way. An Indian bureaucrat, they will make your life miserable for no fault of yours. That is what a lot of visitors to India would say. This is not my saying really. I mean, the head of Alcatel, a major multinational company, said Indian people are wonderful. Indian market is terrible. That is because he said. So we are perhaps in this discussion referring to the civil service as bureaucracy. But that's part of the story. Bureaucracy is not just government officials. Bureaucrats could be in any big enterprise really, be it a business or even a civil society organization. Whenever there is organization is big, you have the bureaucracy to manage it. That is why my favorite development economist, Ernest Schumann, that small is beautiful and economics as if people matter. So the small is accessible, approachable, and manageable. But when it is big, it leads to bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is cumbersome, slow, and sluggish. So, as I said, Aldous Huxley, what is the image of bureaucracy in India and abroad? In India, as I said, bureaucracy is really not flexible, rigid, too much rule-bound, and some speakers said they are not people-friendly, they are not responsive, neither responsible to the people. For politician, when there is a nexus between politician and bureaucracy, they would find out the interest of the politicians. But when it comes to the common man or woman, they will find several ways how a particular thing cannot be done. That would be their answer: this cannot be done. They will tell you 10 different reasons why it cannot be done. Having said that, bureaucracy is the most, or ICS is the most coveted job in our country. The best of the students, the cream of the student community goes to, things are changing, of course, goes to a civil service. Humorously, in the marriage market, they have the highest premium as civil servants. And the topmost echelons of our the governance, why do they become so anti-people or so non-responsive? This is the nature of the job they perhaps are engaged in and the kind of system they inherit. You asked me about the European or the international context. I lived in Europe, considerable time in the Indian bureaucracy as a private secretary to a union minister. So I could perhaps share my experience. Comparatively, in the British system, the minister is called a secretary, and the secretary, whom we call a secretary in India, is called the permanent secretary. Of course, the meaning is obvious. He is permanent. The ministers will come and go, as someone mentioned. And the permanent secretaries in UK and Europe are permanently invisible, really. They don't come into public sphere. They don't address the press. They don't really are seen, or they don't appear in public life. They do a given job. In a democracy, actually, minister is the head of the executive in a particular department, and then comes the secretary. So they are accountable and responsible, accountable, of course, to the rule book and the government and their service code, but they are responsible to the ministers. And someone said bureaucrats are like a horse, and if you are a good horse rider, they will take wherever you want. So, to be fair, bureaucrats really efficient all over the world. They are go-getter, implementer, and deliverer. But you need a good master, quote unquote, to make them deliver. And they are the politicians. The contradiction in our democracy compared to the developed democracies in the West is that the politicians in our country are not so much trained, schooled, and informed. They have the people skills of the people. They know how to organize, mobilize people by various tools of political and social mobilization. Some of them are not very credible and authentic, yet they are people's men. But the bureaucrats are informed, they are there, they are educated. So the politicians, while they control the bureaucrats, they also, which is quite unfortunate. And that is where the nexus develops. My immediate predecessor spoke nicely about the nexus. In fact, the famous economist in our country, Professor Raj Krishna put it very nicely. He said the nexus between the Neta, Babu, and Lala in our country is really an impediment to our progress. Neta is politician, Babu is bureaucrat, and Lala is a businessman. And someone, I think it is Professor Dandavate, Madhu Dandavate, who used to say that our politicians support the private sector privately and the public sector publicly, which means that you make rhetorics about the public sector, but you do deals with the private sector. But in the West, in the developed democracies, which we can perhaps compare, and some of their principles and practices we can emulate, there the politicians are educated. Somebody quoted Barack Obama. Barack Obama, before he became the president, he had written books about his life and times in the United States. Most of the politicians, not only books, they write articles, they make policy statements, they're reading and writing. Our politicians here have ghost writers. They don't write, but you have them published. These days, the trend is even higher, where politicians are getting published in leading newspapers. They have ghost writers. They don't write themselves. I have done ghost writing for many politicians, so I can tell you. But they don't have the time for study, and they depend upon bureaucrats. Not only that, they use the bureaucrats as their advisors, which is even worse. And now, since Rajiv Gandhi and more with the present Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they are appointing bureaucrats as ministers, which is the worst. You see, bureaucrat, somebody said the meaning of bureaucracy, it's French word bureaucracy, which means a desk. You see, so I have written in my articles, the bureaucrats spend their entire life amongst file and furniture, whereas the politicians feel the pulse and passion of the people. That is why politicians should represent the people and should be head the governance despite their limited education, because they can articulate people's moods and grievances, not bureaucrats. I want to tell you, I can go public here, when our present foreign minister was appointed, was a fine bureaucrat from my university, from where even professor, that is JNU, he was from my school, School of International Studies, and he was a good bureaucrat, but he's a bad minister. I wrote an article when he was appointed as a foreign minister. I said, the wrong choice, Mr. Prime Minister. And there are a maximum number of bureaucrats in this administration. So, are you using bureaucrats as advisor, as our mentor? Somebody talking about mentoring bureaucrats, and as our ministers. They are not supposed to. They don't spend time with the people. In a democracy, only elected people. In a representative democracy, only people who are elected by the people should be ministers. So we have a misconception about bureaucrats here. We should understand them correctly. They have to be neutral, impartial. They need not really be people-friendly. I'm now speaking for them when they don't mix up with the people. I remember one of my professors, historian, Professor Altaf Hussain, was our administrative officer. So when I asked him to be flexible, he said, Giri, I am an administrator, not your teacher here. The moment I relax, I really dilute the meaning of governance of this university. So you cannot expect the bureaucrats to relax the rules. They are supposed to maintain the rules. It is the politicians who make them bend the rules. So in a foreign country, if the rule is codified, then they will not allow anybody to break it. That is why when you talk of British democracy, we teach our students, and everybody perhaps knows, that in Britain, rule of law prevails. I'll give you a personal anecdote. There was a bridge, a single suspension bridge, which is one of the biggest, I think, in the world, called Humber Bridge, which was very near my. I was trying to cross the bridge. I had to pay certain pounds to do that. And the guard there stopped me. And as an Indian student, I tried to use my Indian technique of befriending him and appealing to him that he should waive my the fees for crossing the bridge. So he said, gentlemen, you are a student, but even if the queen passes this bridge, she has to pay the taxes. So that is the kind of rule of law which is applicable to everyone. And the bureaucrats are supposed to maintain those rules. Abroad, in many countries, Africa, Latin America, Asia, of course, is very much like India. Bureaucracy is steeped in corruption, less transparent, unaccountable, lack of specialized skills, unapproachable, etc. But in Europe, bureaucrats are very carefully chosen and they are trained in service continually. An interesting thing in the developed democracy is that the bureaucrats and politicians really interchange their positions. So a politician, even India also, a politician can be sent as an ambassador or as a governor, which are executive positions. But it happens, like I think someone was quoting the spoil system in the United States, that Americans choose their bureaucrats from among the public. They need not necessarily be from civil service. That is again the difference. So you can see there are people who are politicians who can be bureaucrats there, but not the vice versa. That's another difference. Talking of, this is where the specialist skills come into play. Again, Professor Rajkrishna humorously, very wittily, used to say, in the appointment of, he was a great speaker, so he used to say, the appointment of IS officers, the absence of talent is guaranteed. What it means that the head of the agriculture governance or the secretary of agriculture may not know a word about agriculture. Likewise, the secretary of defense may not know anything about defense and they are still appointed. So that is again a paradox, because these bureaucrats are supposed to, or not only supposed to, they are actually running the governance in case of our politicians not knowing the nitty-gritty of their department. And imagine bureaucrats are not having the domain knowledge, what will happen to the department? And we have seen the pathetic consequences of such cases of the bureaucrats not having and the politicians not having adequate knowledge. Increased corruption. Bureaucracy is the really a mother of corruption, because it is the bureaucrats who implement the decisions. If, like Mr. Atre was saying, if bureaucrat says no, it cannot be done. So only when there is complicity, collusion between bureaucrats and politicians, then only corruption can happen. Because politicians do not execute anything. They only execute or they formulate the policies. It is the bureaucrats, they sign, and on their signature, decisions are taken. Lord Acton from Britain made a famous statement: power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Which means that our IAS officers, by implication ministers, because I said they are the head of the department, they are really loaded with unlimited powers. That is why power leading to corruption. So the power should be decentralized. There was an attempt during the reforms in Panchayati Raj in 1993 to devolve power to the bureaucracy up to the village level. And it has happened across in the European Union. European Union is based on devolution and the principle of subsidiarity. What it means is that anything that can be done at local level need not be taken to the upper level. And devolution is that since in European Union, you talked about Europe, there are 28 states now, they come together to form this, different countries come together to form this supranational body called European Union. They have to have certain power. So the power is pulled up and devolved downwards. But it's not happening in our country. And the latest instance is the power is getting more centralized. The case of the Chief Secretary in Bengal is the power being concentrated. When a bureaucrat is assigned to the state and he is heading a state, he will report to the Chief Minister. So since he belongs to the All India Service, Indian Administrative Service, the DOPT, which controls the civil servants, Department of Personnel Training, cannot interfere and disturb an officer. That is against the spirit of federalism in our country. So that is again not respected. It is true an IS officer is an All India officer, but he has been assigned to the state. As long as he is in the state, he has to follow the Chief Minister. So you can talk to the Chief Minister, not to the Chief Secretary. So bureaucracy can be efficient, productive as it is, and really they are fine officers. But we need sound politics, erudite and informed politicians to make this bureaucracy deliver. I'd conclude by saying that I started by saying that Indian bureaucrat is a nightmare, but Indian bureaucrat also is an asset. If at all in this country is integrated as one political unit, thanks to the bureaucracy. Not only bureaucracy in the government, bureaucracy in the army, and bureaucracy in other institutions, all India institutions which hold the country together. So I think bureaucracy by itself is neutral, impersonal, efficient. If I have to blame someone, I'll blame our politicians who are not with the bureaucracy efficiently. They are either making them their advisors or their bosses, quote unquote, or they are interfering in their work, bullying them by disincentives, transfers, demotion, etc. So if bureaucracy in fact is insulated from politics, whereas like police, IPS is demanded, and on the other hand, they work as the deliverer of the political decisions and governance, then we'll have a strong, sound, and healthy democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your input. And it is really a pleasure to have you in this board. And really, the both side of things we have seen. And we have come to the end of this program. And if any questions, viewer, you can put in our inbox, and we definitely go with you with the answer. And today we are ending our session here. Thanks for watching us, and we will come with some other topics soon. Thank you.